Hey, this is Joe, and in this video I'm going to show you how to remove the rear wheel to perform various maintenance items on the Jetson Bolt Pro. For example, let's say you have to change your rear brake rotor, or you have to get at the motor, or you have to replace your chain. All kinds of things you can do by pulling the rear wheel off. There could possibly be some complications in that the electric motor that is mounted to the rear wheel may not disconnect at the rear wheel. You may have to disconnect the motor directly from the motor controller. So what we want to do is, as you see here, we need to flip the bike upside down, and we need to go ahead and pull the battery cover off the Jetson Bolt Pro. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we can proceed by showing you how we can remove that rear wheel. First thing we want to do is to remove all the screws from the battery cover. You can do that with a Phillips screwdriver. So let's go ahead and loosen all those screws. Make sure you don't lose the screws. When you take the cover off, put all the screws inside the cover. Make sure that you disconnect the charging port. You don't want to damage that charging port. So hang on to the connector, and you want to disconnect that connector, and you want to pick up all of your screws and put them in the cover. Next thing you want to do is get yourself a 3/8" drive 19mm socket. If you don't have a socket set, you can use an adjustable jaw wrench to remove the axle wheel bolts. Notice, by loosening the axle wheel bolts, we are going to loosen the kickstand. So we're going to have to remove the kickstand. Go ahead and remove the nuts. And you'll notice on each side there is a washer. And the washer sits on top of the kickstand bracket. So you want to take the kickstand bracket off, and you want to put that in your cover so you won't lose it. Take the other nut and washer off. Also put it in your basket. On the left side, or the back side, there's a little nut on there, and it holds an adjuster screw that you can use to slide the wheel this way to take up any slack in the chain. What you want to do is get yourself a crescent wrench or a small 1/4" drive socket set, and you want to loosen the nut on the adjuster. As you notice, there's the adjuster and a little bracket and a nut. So you want to make sure you again put those in your cover, and you want to take note on how you took that off. This slides on to the axle nut facing this way on the other side, and then this piece is used to go over the part of the frame that the axle fits into to take the tension off. So you want to put that take it off, and you want to put that in your cover. If you notice, underneath the frame slots, there is also a washer on each side. You want to make sure you take note that there's a washer underneath the frame portion on the axle on each side. So when you put the wheel back in, you want to make sure you'll get your washers in the proper order. What we want to do now is slide the wheel all the way forward. And what we want to do is gently slide that wheel forward. Twist your pedals until the chain slides off to the sprocket. Then we can remove the chain from the front sprocket. And pull it off of the axle. And by loosening that, now we can get at, there's some clamps here on the motor cable. We're going to have to remove the cable from these little brackets. And how they slide in is you can twist the wire sideways, and then you can pull the wire out from the little clamp like this. That will give us some extra room in the cable to pull the rear wheel from the frame. Before you attempt to remove the rear wheel, you're going to have to get yourself a set of metric Allen wrenches, and you're going to have to remove the caliper from the brake rotor. Otherwise, you won't be able to slide the rear wheel away from the frame. So let's go ahead and do that now. Make sure you catch the bolt and the little locking mechanism, unlike I did, let it fall all over the floor. You want to catch that, and there's two little pieces on the inside of the caliper. You want to catch those, put them in your cover. You also want, before you take this out, you want to look at this and make sure you see that there's two pieces underneath the caliper, and there's one piece on the top. So you want to make sure when you put the caliper back on that you put these two little spacers on underneath the caliper. And there's one spacer. Once you get it loose, put your hand on the caliper, pull off the two spacers. There's a washer and a spacer. The washer goes on first, and then the spacer goes on. Pull the bolt out, put the washer on and the spacer, and put that in your cover. You can now slide the caliper off the rotor, and now we can take a peek at the wire that connects to the motor. notice what you can do is once you pull the wheel off, you can rest it on the frame, and if you just want to work on either the caliper or the rotor, you don't have to disconnect the wire. If you want to change the tire, you're then going to have to disconnect the cable, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's go ahead and put our hardware back in the cover. After you remove the wheel and set it up on the frame and rest it there, find the wire, the largest wire from the motor on the hub wheel and jiggle it. And let me reposition the camera here. As you jiggle the wire, find the wire that jiggles, and what you're going to find is there's a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wiring connectors here. These are the 5 wires that connect up to the leads that go into the motor. What we're going to have to do is, you notice here on the frame there is a hole in the frame here, and there's a hole in the frame here. What we're going to have to do is disconnect these 5 wires. Then we're going to take some string and we're going to tie a piece of string on the end of each one of these wires. Then we can pull each of these wires up through the frame and leave the string in through the hole here. And then once we pull the wires up, we can untie the string from the wire harness. But we want to leave the string in through the frame so that when we go to reroute the wires, we can then feed the wire down in and pull the wire through the bottom hole. It's going to be a little tricky, but if you don't use the string, it's going to be near impossible to feed these wires through. So what we're going to do now is take each one of these wires, and you notice there's a green to green, there's a yellow to yellow, there's a 1, 2, 3, 4 wire to a 4 wire with a black connector. There's a white wire, a single white wire, and there's a single blue wire. We're going to disconnect each one of these wires, and we're going to tie a string to each one and then pull that wire up through the frame, leaving the string attached. Then when we get the wire out of the frame, we can untie it from each of the wires, but leave the string in the frame. That way, when we go to feed the wires back in through, all we have to do is pull the string through. So let's go ahead and disconnect these individual wires. How you do that is on each of the wires there's a little quick disconnect connector, and what you're going to have to do is pinch that. Actually, there's a little toggle right here. You're going to press that and you're going to disconnect each of the wires. Again, there's a little, each one may be a little different. On the big wiring harness, there's a pinch. You pinch it and you disconnect. Okay, and then these other wires are basically what are called bullet connectors, And how you disconnect these is you're going to have to gently pull. Notice that looks like a little bullet. That's why they're called bullet connectors. So when you push them back together, they go into the bullet. When you disconnect it, that's how you have it. So we're going to disconnect each one of these. Note that the color code on each side of the connector is the same. So you want to make sure when you plug it back in, you keep your wire colors the same.